Good morning. It's good to see everybody out this morning. If you will, take your Bibles and turn to the book of Job. The book of Job with a B. Not Job, but Job. Spelt Job, pronounced Job. Before we get into that, I want to plug what I know Jerry will announce it, and it needs to be announced, that we will be hosting the Delta Enrichment Seminar this year. Again, it'll be January the 10th. It'll be pretty much most of the day Saturday, go into the afternoon, but it will be a little different this time. It's going to be a focus on the family, a family enrichment seminar. Men, it's going to teach us how to love our wives. Women, it's going to teach you how to love your husbands. And then, for everybody that has children, it's going to teach us how to raise godly children in an ever-present evil world that we live in. And I know that that's applicable. So, want you to think about that. Think very hard about being there. Make plans for that on January 10th. And also, we'll be having a singing workshop, and that's on advance, Lord willing, February, the very end of February to the 1st of March. So it'll be kind of a 3-day thing. But that's on in the future. Food bags. Youth, we will be delivering food bags after the meal today. So be prepared for that. And those are out there, and we will get that and take care of that. Also, 2 events coming up this week. Christmas Eve, there will be a lunch at our house. We will have soup, we'll have chili, and we'll have some gumbo. Anybody that wants to come, please do. Our house will be open. If you want to bring some soup or some crackers or some cornbread, that would be wonderful. So everybody, Christmas Eve lunch at our house, come on. Also, Christmas Day, which will be a Thursday, I think. My days have all messed up. I had Christmas Eve on a Tuesday, so I'm all discombobulated. Sheila doesn't like that word, but she's in the nursery now, so I can say it. But anyway, there will be a meal, I guess traditional Christmas meal, or if you want to call it that, whatever, will be here in the fellowship hall, so everybody that can come to that. We got it? Got it? Okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure. All right, let's go ahead and get and be praying. We have a ton of people out right now traveling. Be praying for them and for others. My family will be here, Lord willing, the day after Christmas and spend about 9 days. So you'll get to see why that I'm so troubled and everything when you meet my sister and how she beat me up and all that. But anyway, looking forward to family time. That's really what this is about for me, is giving and family time. So anyway, let's get into our lesson. I want to start, this is going to be a little strange because a lot of people have a preconceived mindset about what should be preached today. We're going to do something a little different. We're going to start a series that, Lord willing, will start today and will end the first Sunday in January. And this series is designed to help us be more confident in our relationship with God, if we have one. And maybe you don't, but you can. And we will see that as well. This morning we're going to look at Job's perspective, because last week, you remember, we looked at living without a doubt, and how we looked at Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, how they could live with confidence without a doubt, but their faith was grounded in something. It was grounded in discipline. It was grounded in courage. And it was grounded to be obedient to their Lord. And also, this morning, I want to kind of piggyback off of that to start this series on I know. Because Job makes a statement, and we will get to it in a few minutes, but it's a song that we sing. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know. When we sing that, do we believe it? Or is it, I know that my Redeemer? Or is it, I know? Do we have that confidence in our relationship with God? So this morning, We're going to look at I know that my Redeemer lives from Job's perspective. Lord willing, next Sunday we're going to look at I know that my Redeemer lives, and it's going to be all about Jesus. I know that He lives. And then we're going to look, Lord willing, the first Sunday in the year, we will look at I know from Paul's perspective. Because he said, I know whom I have believed and am persuaded that He is able to keep what I've committed to Him until that day. So is that good? I know. Shouldn't we as Christians live a life of I know? Or maybe. Christians in the first century, it wasn't a maybe for them. So let's live lives of I know. And if you don't have a relationship with God and His Son Jesus Christ through the gospel, I want you to think about that as well as we're winding down 2014, Lord willing, and beginning 2015. So, this morning, this is going to be kind of a completely different. It's going to be more of an inductive sermon. I've never really done one, so we'll just see how this goes. But we're going to look at Job. We're going to look at the whole book. I know Bill's like, what? We're going to do a quick overview of the book, because many people don't even have a clue about what Job's about. All they know is it's about suffering. But there's more to it than that. And then we're really going to focus on I know that my Redeemer lives. So an overbook of Job. In Job 1:1, we find that Job was a wonderful man. He was an outstanding man of character. You look at him and you find him as a man that is blameless, a man that is upright, one who feared God and he shunned evil. Oh, if that could be said of the Lord's church today, that we are this kind of people, that we are striving to be blameless and upright. We fear God, we respect Him above all, and we shun evil. We put away evil from us as best as we possibly can. But we find something that, here in this overview of Job, that even good people suffer. There's a misconception that is being taught throughout this world that has gained popularity, that if you become a Christian, that you will never suffer. And that you will prosper. You will have so much money. If you just obey God, you will have money flowing in. Did God ever teach that in His Word? No. And when we come to the new covenant, we understand that we are invited to suffer. Job was about to suffer like no man had suffered at this time. Now, I'm not going to speculate about when this book was written. It's not about that. But we find that God allows Satan to handle Job. We find that in verse 8 of chapter 1, then the Lord said to Satan, after Satan had come to him and told him he was roaming to and fro on the earth, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil? Of course, did Satan take kindly to that? No. And he does the same thing in chapter 2 and verse 3. Satan, because he is Satan, and he is the devil. Satan means adversary. Do you know what the devil means? Slanderer. He slanders God and accuses God and tells him the only reason Job is serving you is because you've hedged him in. You've hedged him in. And you've protected him. And he's not had any bad things happen to him. If he ever had one bad thing happen, I'm paraphrasing, he would leave you in a second. God said, no sir, not Job. Job is a man of character. God knew Job's heart. And He allowed him to assault him. And Satan assaulted Job. He assaulted him mentally. He assaulted him emotionally. And he assaulted him physically. We find that in chapter 1, verses 13 through 19. We're going to move on for time's sake. In chapter 2, verse 7. The man lost every bit of his possession. Everything he had. His camels, his oxen, everything he had, he lost. And then on top of that, he lost all of his children. That's pretty tough, right? That's tough. When we think about losing everything. everything that means anything to you, your children. I can't imagine how Job felt at this time. And then, on top of that, Satan accuses God again and said, if you let me touch his flesh, then he'll give it up. And he had boils on him, it says, from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head. Anybody ever had chicken pox in here? Some people have had chicken pox. If you have not had chicken pox, you don't want them. That's a miserable time. But I don't think chicken pox compared to the boils, the sores from the body. If you got sores on the bottom of your feet, can you walk? No. The man was laid up in pain physically, in mental excruciation, and emotionally he had lost everything. Think about that. Think about where he is. But Job's response, I'm only going to read verse 20 because we'll come back to the rest. It says, then Job arose, tore his robe, shaved his head, and he fell to the ground and worshiped. How many of us, if we had something, one bad thing happen, instead of worshiping God, we would, can't believe you did this to me. Job worshiped. He worshiped God. And then his wife's response, look at you. You're trying to be upright? Curse God and die. How would you feel if your wife told you that, men? I hope that nobody's in here has already experienced that. That would be an emotional assault as well, do you think? Curse God and die. Just die. Your soulmate's telling you to die. What did he say? Verse 10 of chapter 2. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Man, that is character right there, folks. That is character. He's lost it all, and then his wife verbally abuses him. And he said, we've got to take it both. Because God does, we find Jesus saying, allow the rain to fall on who? The just and the unjust. And then we have his buddies come on the scene. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Chapter 2, verses 11 through 13, they came and visited. Now, visiting is very important. And brothers and sisters, we need to be doing more of it. We need to be doing more of it. But they came and they did a great job for 7 days. You know why? Well, we're going to talk about that tonight. More effective in his service, being more effective communicators. You know what they did? They listened. They didn't say a word for 7 days, just sat with him. They did a great work. But then they opened their mouth and everything went to pot. You find here where a series of debates starts. And we're fixing to move on, pick up the pace. But Job starts by asking a question in chapter 3, 1 through 10. He says, why was I even born? Why was I even born? I don't know if you've ever felt that way. I don't know your background, the struggles that you face, but I know we've all had calamity in our lives. But Job is here, why am I even born? Why? What purpose? And then he says in verses 11 through 19, why didn't I die when I was born, why didn't I just be born dead? He was thinking that would be better. He's having thoughts in his mind. In chapter 3, verses 20 through 26, he's asked basically, why am I suffering? Has anybody ever asked, why am I suffering? You ever been to that state? Why am I going through this? Why am I suffering? A lot of people have. You may not admit it. I have to say I've been in that boat myself. But in chapter 4 through 14, we see the debates between these three men and Job. The problem with these three men, they had a misconception of God. They thought that God worked off of the law that the pagans had, in this, that if you have problems in your life, that means you're not living right. They operated on the basis of karma. Now, do we believe in that today? Because a lot of people say that. Karma's going to catch up with you. You doing bad. Well, Paul told Timothy something different. He said, some men's sins follow them to the grave. But at the end, it's all going to be brought out, right? In the judgment. But they had a misconception of God. They thought because bad things were happening to Job, he had some kind of sin in him. So, let's move on. In chapters 4 through 14, they give the first round of speeches, and each time Job gives his response. Now, Lord willing, we will do some work from Job this year. 2015 is next year, right? Right? Okay, next year, Lord willing, we will look more at Job, because there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from the book of Job. In chapters 15 through 21, we find the second round, and that's where we will be for the remainder of our study, of debates, and Job answers. In chapters 27 through 31, this is almost like a courtroom. Job brings his closing arguments, and it comes in two phases. He gives the first phase, and then he backs it up with the second phase, his closing arguments. And then in chapters 32 through 37, an interesting young man by the name of Elihu enters. And he's called a man with a lot of words and very angry. Is that a dangerous combination? When you find somebody that's very angry and has got a lot to say, is it usually going to end well? No. But Elihu comes on and he challenges Job twice. He challenges Job. But he's angry, and there's a reason. He's angry at Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar because they hadn't been able to shut Job up. And he's mad about it. He's very angry about it. And then he is angry because Job is sitting there trying to justify his situation. That he is righteous. And he doesn't understand why he's suffering. That's the basic plea of Job. I'm striving to live a godly life, and I just don't understand what's going on. And Elihu is mad about that. Angry about that. And then in Elihu's mind, he defends God to Job because of his questions. But then in chapters 38 through 42, we find the deliverance of Job. But not only Job, many people miss this part. Job's friends need deliverance as well, don't they? Because they said some false things about God. They've made some misconceptions, and we can be guilty of that as well. They did that, and they were told that they needed to sacrifice, but God challenged Job twice from a whirlwind. Job answers God twice, and we will see that. Job realizes his place, where he's at, and then Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar are told that they need to make a sacrifice because they have misspoken about God. And we need to think about what we say regarding God. But then we find the beautiful thing, and we will conclude in James 5:11. We find the beautiful thing. Job is blessed with twice as much as he had before. Physically and with his family as well. The most beautiful daughters, it says. I'm not going to go there. Everybody thinks they have the most beautiful daughters, don't they? If you got a girl. And probably the most handsome boys if you got a boy. But that's another sermon for our conversation for another day. Let's go back to our focus. Chapter 19 of Job. This is where we'll spend the next few minutes of our sermon. Chapter 19 of Job. This is going on between the second cycle of debates between Bildad, and he's actually answering Bildad of his misspeaking. And we find within this passage, in Job 23 through 29, that Preston read for us so wonderfully. Thank you, Preston. we find this beautiful statement in verse 25. Job 19 and verse 25. Listen to this now. This man is in turmoil, mentally, emotionally, and physically. He is in complete and turmoil. Boils all over him. Has lost everything. And he says this, "For I know that my Redeemer lives." I know that my Redeemer lives. That's what we're going to focus on for the next few minutes. For I know that my Redeemer lives. He says. What was this statement about? It was a statement of personal conviction. He was personally convicted in the fact that he knew he saved. It didn't matter what his wife said. Was that going to help him get out of this situation? No. It didn't matter what Eliphaz said. It sure wasn't going to help him. It didn't matter what Bildad said. That wasn't going to help him. It didn't matter what Zophar said. That wasn't going to help him. And what the angry man Elihu said sure wasn't going to help him coming up. What mattered was his personal conviction. For I. Let me ask you this. Job knew what he believed. He knew exactly what he believed. Do we? Do we? You may be suffering this morning. Do you believe that your Redeemer lives? What do you believe this morning? Just think about that. Job knew what he believed. For I. He said, I know. For I know. I know. Even though God was silent, there was no speculation. No speculation on Job's end. He knew. For I know. He said, I know. Even though there was no answer while this was happening, Job was certain about this situation. He was completely confident. Even though his friends thought he was guilty, Job knew his Redeemer lived. I know, he said. Now let me ask you this. When it comes to God, what do we know? Big guy up in the sky? Big Daddy up there? No, we better respect him more than that. What do we know about God? Think about it. Then he says, for I know that my. That my. He used a pronoun here to talk about his relationship with God. And I'm going to tell you this. If anybody tells you that you can't have a personal relationship with God, they're teaching you false doctrine. We are to have a personal relationship with God. I know that my, that's a personal possessive. It's possessive pronoun. Y'all can correct me on my English and stuff later. Charlie and Kim, y'all talk to me later about that. Let me ask you this. Do we have that kind of relationship with our Creator, with our Sustainer? Do we have a relationship at all with the Father? Because He wants to be your Father. He wants to be your Father. Right now, if you don't. Job knew, for I know that my. And then he says, I know that my Redeemer. For I know that my Redeemer. Now, a Redeemer in those days was one who bought back something that was stolen, that was lost, or that was just gone. The Redeemer purchased it back, bought it back. Now, there's a lot of speculation as to who Job was talking about, but from the context, I see no speculation. He's talking about God. It's about God. That's all he is talking about this whole time, is his situation and God. For I know that my Redeemer. What had he lost? Well, let me read Job 6:11. What strength do I have that I should hope? And what is my end, that I should prolong my life? Proverbs 3:13 and verse 12 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. But when desire comes, it is a tree of life. Job had lost hope in his situation, but he knew that his Redeemer could buy it back. He knew that his Redeemer could buy back the hope that he had lost. Let me ask you this, because this gave him strength to carry on. How many times do we think about God buying us back from sin? Do you ever think about that? Or is it just when you come to the building? I think about it a lot. That God would send the very best of heaven for a sorry lot like Mark Shiers. Do you think about God's redeeming ability? The redeeming ability of God the Father for us. Job knew. It gave him confidence to carry on in the midst of something that probably none of us have even come close to dealing with. For I know that my Redeemer, and then he says something beautiful. For I know that my Redeemer lives. There's a movie out now called God Is Not Dead. And there's some problems in that movie, but there are some good things in that movie. Some good apologetics, some good defense for God. Let me submit to you right now, I don't care what you... He is not dead. God is alive. We sing that song. Do we mean it? Powerful song. He might not be able to see the evidence for God right this time, but he knew that God was alive. Do we? Do we know? Do we live like it? His health, his fortune, his family was gone. Still, I know that my Redeemer lives. I know it. I'm completely confident that God is alive. Let me ask you this, when trials come our way, do we know with the utmost assurity God is alive? I hope we do. I hope we never doubt the fact that we have a Redeemer who bought us back from sin. This morning, let me ask you this. Do you believe in God no matter what, come what may? I told you in James 5:11, we find the conclusion of the matter. Usually we focus on the fact of Job's patience, right? Isn't that what we focus on? But that's not the conclusion. It talks about that. But the end, we find that the Lord Himself is very compassionate and merciful. But you know what, that is not just going to happen. It hinges on your response to God and my response to God. Now let's quickly look at Job's response to God. When things, sometimes, I was talking to Jerry about this morning. He was talking about heaven. He is mentioning heaven to me. Sometimes do we scratch and claw to stay here on this earth, this sinful earth, when we could go to be in a better place? How many times do we say, well, being here is better than the alternative? Because if we're right with God, we're not under the earth, we're with Him. But let's look, go back to Job 1. This is absolutely beautiful. Job 1, verses 20 through 22. When he had everything taken away from him, his stuff that we cling to, and his family, here's his response. Then Job arose, tore his robe, and shaved shaved his head, and he fell to the ground and worshipped, and he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Wow. In all this, Job did not sin nor charge God with wrong. When his spouse encouraged him, give it up, curse God and die. Something is wrong with you, was the implication. We find in verse 10, we've already read it, but he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speak. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Go with me to Job chapter 40. Job chapter 40, when he is confronted with God, Job's response. Then Job answered the Lord in verse 3 and said, behold, I am vile. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand over my mouth. Once I have spoken, but I will not answer. Yes, twice, but I will proceed no further. Turn over to 42. Chapter 42, verse 1. Then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do everything, and that no purpose of yours can be withheld from you. You asked, who is this who hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Listen, please, and let me speak. You said, I will question you, and you shall answer me. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes sees you. Therefore I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. I pray that we will have the courage and the conviction that no matter what we face, we will know with the surety that our Redeemer lives, and that we will always have a penitent spirit, willing, when we see ourselves wrong with God, we will make it right with God. Now this morning, I want to ask you something. If you're here and you don't have a relationship with God, we find in Galatians 3:26, for you are all sons of God by faith in Christ Jesus. For as many of you as have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. And then we find that beautiful thing. You are all Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. This morning, do you have a relationship with God? Have you been willing to confess His name before men and turn away from a life of sin, striving to live for Him? This morning, if you don't have a relationship with Him, you have faith. You can believe that He is Christ, is the Messiah. Put Him on baptism, have a relationship with Him, a personal relationship with Him. Maybe you have and you've got struggles in your life. Whatever the need is, we're here to serve you as together we stand and sing.